You've seen Faerie in Magic before, but what if casting spells on your opponent's turns built an army that slowly turned their own creatures against them? That's exactly what Alela does best, and when the Faeries start swarming, the table starts squabbling. Hi everyone, I'm Full Harmonicon and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about one of the trickiest tribes in Magic, and the commander that gave them exactly what they needed to succeed. She rewards us for playing at instant speed, creates a steady swarm of flying fairies, and uses Goad to turn enemy combat into absolute chaos. It's Alela, Cunning Conqueror, and if you like flashing in spells, building an army on other players' turns, and making enemy combat steps a nightmare to navigate, this deck is for you. Alela is a 2/4 fairy warlock with flying for 4 mana. She has 2 very powerful abilities. First, whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, you create a 1/1 black fairy rogue creature token with flying. Then, whenever one or more fairies you control deal combat damage to a player, you goad target creature that player controls. That means Alela builds an army while we keep mana open. Then, it turns our opponent's creatures against each other once our army starts to connect. If you enjoy synergy-focused commander breakdowns like this, hit that subscribe, because there's a lot more on the way. The plan here is pretty straightforward. First, we get Alela online. Then, we cast spells on our opponent's turns to make as many fairies as possible. And finally, we win with a swarm of tiny flyers while our opponent's creatures are forced to attack anyone but us. Now let's get to the meat of the deck, the Faeries. Obira, Dreaming Duelist, is a perfect fit here. She has flash, she helps trigger Alela on an opponent's turn, and she pings each opponent whenever another fairy enters under our control. That means every token Alela makes also chips away at the table. Scion of Una is another excellent flash creature. It pumps our fairies, but more importantly, it gives them Shroud. That means we can hold it up as an emergency protection when someone points removal at our key piece. Tegwell, Duke of Splendor, is the other face commander of the Fae Dominion precon, and he does a lot of work here. He buffs the rest of our fairies and gives us insurance by drawing cards whenever they die. Glenelandra Liege is another Lord style effect. It doesn't specifically say fairies, but it pumps blue and black creatures, which covers everything we care about. High Fae Trickster is one of the best synergy pieces in the deck. It has flash, and it gives all our spells flash, which means triggering Alela becomes much easier. Bitter Bloom Bearer also has flash, and once it's in play, it starts making extra fairy tokens on each of our turns, helping the board grow even when we aren't spending cards to do it. Archmage of Echoes is just awesome. It lets us copy each fairy permanent spell we cast, which means our best creatures can start coming in pairs. Yes please. Brightwing Bandit gives us a sneaky bit of card advantage by stealing cards from the top of our opponent's libraries and letting us cast them with mana of any color. Malleable Imposter has flash and can become a copy of the best creature on the table, which gives the deck a really flexible trick at instant speed. Shadow Puppeteers is one of our big finishers. It makes 3 fairy tokens when it enters, and when our creatures attack, it turns them into 4/4 dragons, ending games out of nowhere. Una, Queen of the Fae, gives us a late game mana sink. We can exile cards from an opponent's library, then make fairy tokens for each card of the chosen color that gets hit. Fairy Bladecrafter grows whenever our fairies connect, and when it dies, each opponent loses life equal to its power, so even removing it becomes painful. Halo Forager lets us cast an instant or sorcery from a graveyard for a bit of extra mana, which can turn someone else's best spell into our value. Then we have Fairy Vandal, Glamour Gifter, Quickling, and Pestamite. Each of them has flash and comes with its own upside. But the main thing is that casting them on our opponent's turn gives us another fairy from Alela. Next, we have some cards that aren't necessarily fairies, but they help the game plan along. Bitter Blossom is technically a fairy card, just not a creature. It makes a flying fairy token at the beginning of each of our upkeeps, which is exactly what this deck wants. Nettling Nuisance is also a fairy, but it creates goaded pirate tokens for our opponents whenever our fairies connect, which adds even more chaos to combat. Una's Blackguard works with Alela because her tokens are Faerie Rogues. It gives those rogues +1/+1 counters as they enter, and then makes opponents discard cards when creatures with counters connect. Reflections of Lityara lets us copy each fairy we cast, which can get out of hand very quickly. Notorious Throng can make a huge number of flying fairy tokens based on the damage dealt to our opponents that turn, and if we cast it for its prowl cost, we even get an extra turn. Leyline of Anticipation is here because if it starts in our opening hand, it begins on the battlefield for free. After that, it lets us cast all our spells at instant speed, which is perfect for Alela. Fairies don't struggle for card draw. Nimrus, Una's Trickster, has Flash, triggers Alela, and then rewards us whenever we cast spells on our opponent's turns by looking at 2 cards, putting 1 into hand and 1 into the graveyard. Voracious Tome Skimmer draws cards when we cast spells on our opponent's turns, which is exactly what we already want to be doing. Fairy Mastermind has Splash, comes in with another token from Alela, makes everyone draw a card, and lets us draw whenever an opponent draws their second card in a turn. Talion, the Kindly Lord, asks us to choose a number from 1 to 10, then draws us cards and drains opponents whenever they cast spells with that mana value, power, or toughness. Rankle, Master of Pranks, disrupts opponents while giving us choices between sacrificing, drawing, and discarding cards. Fairy Formation is a great late game mana dump, making more fairies and drawing more cards. Distant Melody and Harmonized Crescendo both give us big burst card draw based on our fairy count. Keep Watch can take advantage of either our own swarm or our opponent's goaded attacks by drawing cards equal to the number of attacking creatures. Reconnaissance Mission draws us cards whenever our flyers connect, and with this many evasive creatures, that should happen a lot. Kindred Discovery is ridiculous in any blue tribal deck. It draws when fairies enter, and it draws when fairies attack. Yes, please. For interaction, we're trying to stay at instant speed as much as possible. Spell Stutter Sprite is one of the classic fairy counterspells. It counters a spell based on our fairy count, and because Alela makes a token before the sprite resolves, it can even increase its own range. Spell Stutter works in a similar way, taxing the spell by 2 plus our fairy count. Brazen Borrower gives us 2 useful plays in 1 card, an instant speed bounce spell, then a fairy with flash. Vendilion Click lets us check an opponent's hand and put a problem card on the bottom of their library. Fairy Fencing gives a creature -3/-3 as long as we control a fairy, which we almost always will, and we can pay extra to increase X. Glenelandra Archmage and Glenelandra Guardian both help us counter non-creature spells, giving the deck even more control. Sower of Temptation steals the best creature on the table until someone deals with Sower. Tegwell's Scouring clears the board but leaves us with 3 flyers after the dust settles. Then we round things out with staples like Counterspell, An Offer You Can't Refuse, Pongify, Rapid Hybridization, and Reality Shift. Fairies aren't amazing at ramp, so we're relying mostly on mana rocks. Bender's Waterskin is nice because it makes any color of mana and it untaps at the beginning of each untapped step, not just ours. Misleading Signpost has Flash, which triggers Alela and can change the target of an opponent's attacking creature, which is very on theme. Then we have the usual support from Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Dimir Signet, Thought Vessel, and Talisman of Dominance. And finally, a few lands that help round things out. Secluded Glen is a dual land that can come in untapped if we reveal a fairy from our hand. Fairy Conclave can become a fairy creature, which means it can help goad an opponent's creature. 3 Tree City is a tribal ramp staple to a land. Overall, Alela Cunning Conqueror feels exactly like the commander fairies needed. The deck plays tricks, builds a board without tapping out, and turns combat into a political mess where your opponents are constantly being pushed into each other. It captures the mischievous, disruptive natures of fairies perfectly, and honestly, that's exactly what a fairy deck should do. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, Leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more synergy-based Commander content. If you'd like to support the channel further and help vote on future videos, memberships are available. And hey, if you're picking up any of these cards, consider using my TCG Player affiliate link down below. And until next time, may all your spells come with extra fairies.